Shortly after 9 last night, a woman knocked on this door, saying she'd been involved in a traffic accident. When the door was opened, 2 men rushed in, one carrying a rifle.
To a radio station in Berkeley. Since the letter specified that it be published in full by the media, we are presenting it to comply with that request.
The United Federated Forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army, armed with cyanide-loaded weapons, served an arrest warrant upon Patricia Campbell Hearst. All communications from this court must be published in full in all newspapers and all other forms of the media. Failure to do so will endanger the safety of the prisoner. Should any attempt be made by authorities to rescue the prisoner or to arrest or harm any SLA elements, the prisoner is to be executed. And in capital letters under that is death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people.
What we received in the mail today appears to me to be a 7-page statement from the SLA, plus a tape recording which purports to be somebody from the SLA and also the voice of Patricia Hearst. And according to the demands which we'll outline here, it says that all of these things must be publicized in full, which is what we're doing right now.
Ooh, welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, Year of the Phoenix. I'm your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today, we're back with part 3 of the strange and terrifying saga of the Symbionese Liberation Army in the 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And I think when, we left off last time, we had talked about their first great action, the assassination of Dr. Marcus Foster, the superintendent of schools in Oakland. A black reformist kind of liberal figure that was well-liked by the broader kind of left community in the Bay Area, and the serious wounding of his assistant, Blackburn, as well, under the assumption or the assertion by the SLA that they were both CIA agents that were implementing a sinister plot in the Oakland schools for an ID card system and like biomedical databases to track, people for future pig fascist concentration camp, counterinsurgency activity, et cetera, et cetera. And we had talked about that the general consensus, even among like the radical left in Berkeley, was one of like bafflement, I would say, and kind of disgust and dismay at this activity, right? It was a very strange action to come at the
Everyone
gate with.
Immediately thought it was kind of sus,
Yeah, everyone kind of thought it was sus and didn't make sense. Even some of the SLA members, like Russ Little, remembers talking to General Field Marshal Sin Q, Donald DeFreeze, and saying, like, why did we shoot a black guy, man? Like, what the fuck? Like, this is right after Tyrone Guyton was shot down, in Emeryville by some pigs, and caused, a huge uproar, over like racist police killings. Then they come out with this, like this is it's a little curious. And then I think we also covered it was actually, I was actually surprised. It was after they killed Marcus Foster that the 3 original members of the SLA, then, which were, I believe also, aside from Sin Q, were Nancy Ling Perry and Patricia Mizmoon Soltysik. They were the ones who actually participated in the assassination of Foster. And then after that, their compadre, Willie Wolf, I guess, reached out to some other friends that they had made, some other people that had just kind of flown into the Bay Area relatively recently, like in, maybe in like the fall of 1972, and asked all of them if they wanted to join the SLA. And they all said yes. And then they were offered to be in an above ground support unit or a combat unit. And they all chose the combat unit. And, their last time together, the entire core of this group was in their safe house in Clayton, near Concord, out in the suburbs of the East Bay on New Year's Eve. At the end of 1972, going to 73. And shortly after that, a chance late-night encounter with a pig, a Concord police officer, led to Russ Little and Joe Ramiro, 2 of the male members of the group, getting pulled over. a gunfight ensued, and Russ Little was wounded. Joe Romero kind of ran away and then was caught hours later. They were both caught with weapons that were traced back to the Marcus Foster assassination. Not the smartest move. And then the rest of the SLA attempted to burn down their entire safe house and flee, but the fire, went out, and the police were able to amass tons of evidence, about this new mysterious group, including a hit list, that included some big names in, the worlds of business, finance, media, but also, somewhat curiously, I think maybe even listed right under the name of Marcus Foster was one Patricia Campbell Hearst, student at UC Berkeley, right? Daughter of Randy Hearst, who was, I think, at the time, the publisher of the San Francisco Examiner, and along with his brother, W.R. Jr. I always get that. I always stumble over that. They were basically running the Hearst Corporation, the sprawling media empire that their right-wing father, William Randolph Hearst, had built. Citizen Kane himself had built in the early 20th century. These are, this is kind of the Fox News of its day, real big reactionary, kind of press syndicate. And so we come now to early 1974, and what will become the main event in the SLA's tortured and wild existence, the kidnapping of an heiress, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. So I guess I'll say up front, I got to do some more reading, some more digging. I feel like I'm following up on. I love getting every perspective from the different players.
Yeah.
And so many people publish memoirs, and there've been some interesting books. This time, I read most of Patty Hearst's post-prison memoir. I think it was called Every Secret Thing, and it was published in 1982. She spoiler alert, she would be convicted for crimes committed while with the SLA, but then I think after 22 months, President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence, and she basically got to walk free. So by the early 80s, she was able to kind of step forward and tell her, her story from her perspective for the first time. And I think I mentioned to you last time that I'd watched the probably the most serious attempt to the cinematic attempt to depict the SLA Patty Hearst story was Paul Schrader's 1988 film Patty Hearst, which I have talked some shit about, but having read the Patty Hearst memoir now, I think I do understand that he was, I think it was very much his intention to faithfully adapt Patty Hearst's version of the narrative. And it's very narrowly focused on, he's almost ripping scene by scene from the book, basically. It's an extremely faithful book adaptation, and also has elements of docudrama because so many, as we will see today, so many important touchstones in this entire saga are media performances, right? They come in the form of these audio tapes that are delivered to various radio stations, and these communiques that are released, and these performances by Patty herself and General Field Marshal Sin Q and the others. And that is the initial way through which a lot of this is played, and the press conferences with Randy Hearst and Catherine Hearst in Hillsborough, right? Their counter pleas, and this is at a time when modern technology, actually this becomes a big deal a little bit later in the story. Satellite uplinks were coming around for the first, that type of technology for the news media was coming around for the first time. There were crazy innovative ways that the news media around the Hearst home would climb up trees and set up temporary little radio relays or phone relays or something like that, so they could dial straight into their newsroom and report things instantaneously. And it's one of the first really modern media circuses in American history that uses the instantaneous impact of the mass media. And you could say, from the perspective of the SLA, they're very aware of this the entire time. I think I was somewhat amused to see Patty Hearst at one point describe the SLA members she was with as media freaks. And remember the Berkeley Barb episode we brought up? Like, there was kind of controversy about the type of person who was a media freak at the Tribe and the Barb.
Right.
And somebody was so addicted to like the thrill of like the coverage and the media that would be produced from like a radical action kind of event, whether it's a protest or a bombing or something like that. But we're just like obsessed with like watching the tube and listening to like the radio. And, it is interesting. We, in a way, we're all media freaks now, I'd say. Yeah. Like it's hard to tell what was different about that type of person versus like a regular person in the early 70s. But I guess it was an emergent tendency of, even people with super heavy leftist politics sometimes would be, maybe it's an early version of kind of being like internet brain rotted or like irony poisoned by like social media or something like that, despite your hardcore political convictions.
Well, did you know, actually, like, this is kind of interesting. Did you know that there was I mean, maybe we should wait till a little bit later in the narrative, but there was like a kind of SLA aligned, like, journal that was published like starting in 1975 called Dragon. Did you read any of these?
I think I mentioned it to you before we were recording. I found it last night and started reading through them, and I found it to be.
You mentioned that the Berkeley Barb comes up in it.
They get attacked very heavily. I think the main driver behind the Dragon kind of zine or like newsletter was Kathleen Celaya, who would become a sort of member of the SLA like later down the road in this story. She has a kind of interesting, her and the people around her in Berkeley kind of have an interesting intersection with the SLA like later on, and like you said, it starts in 1975, so like after a lot of the biggest events happen that we're about to talk about. But it is interesting, you get a really good sense of the like intra left-wing group dramas and like who thinks who is sus and which news outlets are sus and like what is the generally accepted line of like what type of kind of revolutionary violence is acceptable and what is too far, what type of rhetoric is too far or not far enough. Like you really get a colorful sense, I think, of those debates. And there's a lot of communiques published in it from like the very mysterious New World Liberation Front that was kind of a champion. If we consider
and
it
Orphans of America.
With a K. And the what was it? The Red Guerrilla family, obviously the Black Guerrilla family. Popeye Jackson is a huge figure that pops up constantly. Kind of an interesting guy who's a little bit intersects with his story at various points, even with Randy Hearst. But it is a journal that it is an example of, I think this was probably, it seems like a minority of like Bay Area leftists, but there were some that kind of were like right on to the SLA. Like some people did think this was like fucking epic and like, or at least maybe they weren't perfect, but like they were hardcore and they were like not fucking around, and they had struck blows, like unexpected blows against the pig power structure that like kind of no other group had been able to pull off. So especially after the later the deaths of many of these members, there were kind of swing ebbs and flows of sympathy for the SLA. It's like they would almost do something to totally discredit themselves, and then like something would happen that would sort of ricochet to their benefit, and then like leftists would, because of like the brutal crackdown on them or something, like leftists would be like, oh, this is horrible, like we should stand with these comrades, like they're trying to go for
No, I
daring to struggle.
I remember you mentioning their like debate with the Berkeley Barb. I didn't realize that was the same magazine you're talking about, but I was looking for that. I mean, even like the symbol dragon is kind of interesting. Like, why that? Did they explain that? But
they did in the first issue. I forget. It wasn't directly SLA related. It might have been something related to like something Mao said or something like that. I'm trying to. There was they did mention a specific, or it was like another earlier group that had used the dragon, which they wanted to invoke.
I'm on Freedom Archives right now trying to find it. But yeah, like the what I was looking for originally was this sort of statement about the meaning of their symbol, which we were talking about. It's kind of interesting. It's called like Coming of the Cobra. This is what they say about it. The emblem of the Symbionese Liberation Army is 170,000 years old, and it is one of the first symbols used by people to signify God and life. Interesting claim. That doesn't make any sense, but fine. All right. The two bottom heads on each side of the cobra represent the four principles of life: the sun, the moon, the earth, and the water. The three center heads represent God and the universe and are called the Godhead. Okay. The number 7, as embracing all the universal forces of God and life, can be traced to the Egyptian temples and their 7 pillars, to the 7 candles of the pre-Zionist North African religions, to the Buddhist and Hindu religions.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like
take.
that. Like, right, I guess before they were colonized by Hanukkah, they had 7 candles. But anyway, to the Buddhist and Hindu religions, to the North and South American Indian religions, this is because the 7 principles explain the interrelationships of life, of the family and the state, of the human anatomy and the universe. I mean, they're kind of like implying that like Milana Karenga's like wacky like thing, like, is like from the Neolithic era or whatever, but whatever,
Truly, yeah, it's justified in ancient.
Yeah, like I feel like there's even if you believe that like the number 7 has been like sacred across all these different cultures, it's kind of different from the principles, but whatever. Because the basic principle behind any kind of union and series of relationships must be equally accessible to all concerned, we see why the 7 heads of the cobra have but one body. The thoughts and purpose of each of the 7 heads of the cobra penetrates its common body and soul, and from this we see how the source of the cobra's survival lies not in any individual head, but rather in the relationship and unity of all heads to each other. The Symbionese Liberation Army has selected the 7-headed cobra as our emblem because we realize that an army is a mass that needs unity in order to become a fighting force. And we know that true unity among people must be based upon a concern that is universal. It is a revolutionary unity of all people against the common oppressor enemy of the people. The unity of 7 heads in one body defines the essence of cooperation and socialism in the great undertaking of revolutionary war. Through the Puritan capitalist ethics of competition, individualism, fascism, racism, and sexism and imperialism, the enemy is attacking us. This enemy functions by means of attacking one race or group among us in an attempt to force us into submission and division and isolation from each other. From these attacks, we have learned that our common enemy will not stop until we come together to stop him, for he lives off the murder and oppression of our divided and therefore defenseless people. We have chosen the 7-headed cobra as the emblem of the SLA because our forces are from every walk of life, from every religion, and of every race. And by our unity does our strength and a common goal for freedom from the chains of capitalism make true the meaning of our 7 principles of unity. Our military and political strength arises from the masses of all our people. For when the people are at one in their inmost body, they shatter even the hardest of iron or of bronze. And when the people understand each other in their inmost heart, their words are sweet and strong. The way that they talk is like so amazing. There's like, it's a very distinct idiolect. The words of the people are sweet and strong. Like the 7 memberships of our federation are men and women who are black, brown, yellow, red, white, young, and old. Each of these members joins together and speaks and fights for the best interests of all within the body, just as one head of the cobra cannot be attacked without the others rising to strike with venom in self-defense to destroy the attacker. Each head of the cobra stands in organic need of all the others in order to maintain its survival. From this example of the necessity of unity in order to survive, the SLA will build and fight for the socialist unity of all oppressed peoples. A cry from any one of us will echo in the body of our common ear, and we will attack out of instinct and in self-defense for our survival. And with the venom of our 7 heads, we will destroy the fascist insect who preys upon the life of the people, and with the minds of our 7 heads and the spirit of our one body and soul, we will secure a future for our children.
Whoa.
Yeah. A little bit like weird phrasing, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they picked that up from somewhere else. And
Sinkyu did, he did love to talk about saving the children.
Yeah.
But that's securing the future for our children.
Odd. Yeah, it kind of reads different maybe in our contemporary context where it kind of sounds exactly like the 14 words, but
yeah, of the
I don't know, maybe there was
modern
a
white
previous
supremacy
idea of securing the future for our children that influenced both that sort of slogan and this one. I don't know. It's a bit strange.
Yeah, I forget when that was actually coined. It might have been in the 70s or might have been in the 80s, but I forget which, it was like the Turner Diaries or, something like that. Or Siege, James Mason or something like that. That it might have been, maybe it was earlier actually. Maybe it was the American Nazi Party. I don't know. who were all up in the jails. I did find an answer to your question on issue 1, August 1975 of the Dragon. They say on like the index page, the dragon on the cover was inspired by the red dragon of the Weather Underground organization.
Okay.
And
I see.
technically the group that publishes is called the Bay Area Research Collective.
Right.
And I do believe that, Kathleen Celaya and maybe some of her friends, the driving forces behind publishing this. So, you can see they have a lot of NW New World Liberation Front communiques about bombing. They really like to bomb PG&E, the power utility in the Bay Area. And bomb like substations and stuff a lot. They would also bomb like GM offices.
Yeah,
and,
they seem to
bomb-
hate General Electric and General Motors.
They
in
did,
particular.
They would write a lot of, largely a lot of like accurate things about how they made money off the Nazis in World War II, and they destroyed. It's interesting how like parochial. I don't even mean that in like a negative way, but like how local the grievances of the NWLF are. Like in 1948, like GM conspired with like all these other like corporations and crooked politicians to rip up like the nice and convenient electric streetcars in San Francisco and Oakland and blah blah blah, which is true. We should do an episode about that one day, the Great Streetcar Conspiracy, because I'm still like in the cities LA, where I live now, like they used to have streetcars. You could see it in like the movie Chinatown, and then they ripped them all up, so everyone had to buy cars and use buses and shit. And same in the cable cars in San Francisco, which are so historic now, are like the last like relic of like what almost every city had, like which is. Like we're so far behind on like public transportation infrastructure, it fucking sucks.
Right? Yeah.
And
there's a couple places that have like cable cars like that, but it's always like very like limited. It's always like like a very like one or two routes that like are covered by these like cable buses or cable cars, and
that was by design. That was a conspiracy of these corporate like the oil, basically Standard Oil, General Motors, I think maybe Ford, but like definitely the oil companies and General Motors, realized how good it would be if you needed gas guzzling cars. Every person had to have a gas guzzling car, and which of course created all these lovely smog problems and pollution, etc. So they're actually like their targets are relatively, compared to like the SLA in some cases, like their targets are quite specific. Sometimes it's it's like PG&E, if you do not lower your rates by 10%, like I'm gonna blow up another transformer, like kind of thing. If you don't give a discount to seniors and poor people, like I'm gonna blow up a transformer, like kind of thing. And and then there were so many. I was gonna say
that like in a way the SLA like had a similar thing, although it was even more like provincial, like in a way where like they were like focused on like this, like the fact that the person they chose to target was like the superintendent of schools, like, because it was kind of like this like fixation with like campus politics and like the ID card thing that we were talking about. Like that, is a very sort of focused, specific idea, or concern that they had, more so even the General Motors thing by far, but
right, of all the targets you could take, you could aim at, the Oakland superintendent of schools doesn't seem to be, and one who is not like your classic like
first,
pig,
like action against your first like assassination, like it's kind of like to sort of announce your mission to the world. It's like a very odd choice.
You kill kind of a a well-respected black liberal reformist who is like, leftist groups could kind of live with, and he would dialogue with them and listen to them and all these things. But we know by the people who are really in charge in California, Evel Younger and Ronald Reagan, they were afraid that Marcus Foster would allow the Black Panther indoctrination of Oakland school children, and it would become a breeding ground for revolutionaries, and Maoists and et cetera, communists and people that wanted to overthrow the glorious American system. So in that sense, Foster, from their perspective, I think Foster was a very dangerous figure, in part because of his respectability and his like moderateness, but also his willingness to like listen to more radical groups and like take their concerns seriously and kind of politely chip away like the calcified racism of like Oakland government, which had, kind of the white domination of the government that had existed up till kind of that point. he was much more of a threat to like the Reagan people than he was to the radical left in the Bay Area, So, he seemed more in line with like kind of like a Ron Dellums or a Congressman Leo Ryan type of figure, like a person who was like a liberal, but they would hear out, they weren't like helping the FBI at every turn, like crack down on leftists and shit. And were like often critical of that and critical of the CIA and and could be allies up to a point, right? For more radical left groups. So a little bit confusing, right?
Yes.
Maybe we should jump back in here. We're going into 1974 now. To start, I guess we'll pick up with Brad Schreiber's Revolution's End. Still, I think the most noted overall book about this entire, experience. Though I think I will like to, now that I've read some of the other sources, I think maybe we'll switch over to Patty's POV, I think, for a little while, because obviously she's the only one alive that was there for the most part that wrote a book that talks about what actually happened to her after she was kidnapped. And maybe we'll pop in a little bit and check in on Patty's fiance, Stephen Weed, who also wrote a book, which, he does get to be the fly on the wall in like an interesting way to like inside the Hearst household. And he gets to see things from a particular POV. But anyways, so I'll start here. Chapter 8, People in Need.
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.